Jackson Wolf had never meant to fall in love, not again. Not after his last engagement ended in betrayal, headlines, and a PR disaster so messy it nearly took his company down with it. But here he was, standing in the middle of a dusty Wyoming farm, looking into the eyes of a woman who stirred something in him that billion-dollar deals never could. Her name was Emma Grace Walker. She was barefoot when he met her, literally. Her jeans were frayed at the cuffs, and her flannel shirt had been patched at the elbows. But her voice was like the first breeze after a long, dry season. Sweet, honest, unfiltered. Jackson had flown in on a whim. Tired of the endless string of socialites, influencers, and heiresses who saw him as nothing more than a trophy husband with a deep wallet, he'd taken a break from Manhattan's skyline to explore real America. A rancher friend from Harvard had invited him for a weekend stay in Cheyenne. But it was Emma who made him cancel his return flight. Emma didn't know who he was, at least, that's what Jackson believed at first. She treated him like any other stranger. She wasn't impressed by his Rolex or the private helicopter he arrived in. In fact, she looked mildly annoyed that he'd scared her chickens with it. "I don't care if you're the president," she'd said with her hands on her hips, eyes narrowed. "Next time, land that flying tin can at the airfield, not my pumpkin patch." He'd laughed harder than he had in months. That was the first moment he knew, this woman wasn't like anyone he'd ever met. She didn't want anything from him, and maybe, just maybe, that's what he needed. Days turned into weeks. They rode horses under golden sunsets. Cooked s'mores over fires. She introduced him to her blind dog, Huck, and he told her about growing up in boardrooms instead of playgrounds. Their worlds couldn't be more different, but something invisible stitched them closer together. Emma was kind but firm. She didn't gush over him like the women he knew back in New York. She challenged him, questioned his ethics, teased him when he got fussy over hay dust on his blazer. And when she laughed, it wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't artificial. It came from her gut. Jackson found himself waking up early just to see her feed the horses. He watched her hair curl under the morning mist, her nose red from the cold, her breath forming clouds as she hummed old country songs. He wasn't sure when he fell in love. Maybe it was the time she slapped a rattlesnake with a broom to save his Prada shoe. Or maybe it was when she gave him the last slice of her grandmother's apple pie and pretended she wasn't hungry. But he knew one thing, he didn't want to leave Wyoming. He didn't want to leave her. So, one quiet morning, under the tree she called Mama's willow, he knelt with a sapphire ring. It wasn't the biggest stone he owned, but it had belonged to his grandmother, the only woman he ever truly admired. "Emma Grace Walker," he said, heart pounding. "Will you marry me?" She looked at him with those stormy gray eyes and didn't say anything for a long second. Then she whispered, "Are you sure you're not doing this just to prove something?" He smiled. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life." And just like that, the ranch girl from Wyoming said yes to the billionaire with wounds deeper than his bank accounts. But Jackson had no idea who he had just asked to marry him. He thought he was saving her from a quiet life in the middle of nowhere. He didn't realize she had already saved herself, long before he ever landed that helicopter. And the secrets she was hiding, the reasons she wore secondhand clothes and lived on a broken ranch, they weren't what he thought. They weren't humble. They were calculated. They were waiting. The wedding was a quiet affair. Just a few close friends. No tabloids. No press. Emma refused anything extravagant. "I don't want a castle, Jackson," she'd said. "Just a home." They married under that same willow tree. He was wearing Armani. She wore her mama's old lace dress. And when he kissed her, he felt safe. Finally safe. After the ceremony, they boarded his jet for a private honeymoon in Lake Como, Italy. She smiled as the staff handed her champagne. She leaned into him, called him darlin', and whispered things in his ear that made him forget every headline he'd ever read. But as they landed at the villa, as the lake shimmered in the sunset, and as Jackson prepared to make love to the only woman who had ever calmed his soul, Emma did something that changed everything. She took off her wedding ring, set it on the edge of the marble sink, and walked out of the room with nothing but her leather duffel bag. Jackson, confused, called her name. But she didn't answer. He found her on the terrace, staring at the water. When she turned around, her eyes weren't soft anymore. They were ice. You think I'm just a small town girl, don't you? She said, her voice calm, too calm. Just a farm girl who doesn't understand your world. But Jackson, I built this villa. He froze. What do you mean? He asked slowly. She stepped forward. I designed it, owned it, sold it 3 years ago to the holding company your assistant used to book our honeymoon. I knew it the moment I saw the title in the reservation papers. Jackson's mouth went dry. Emma smiled softly, almost painfully. You wanted to marry someone who didn't care about your money. Someone from the outside. So I gave you that. You lied to me. I let you assume, she said. And that's the difference. The wind whipped her hair around her shoulders. You thought you were saving me, she whispered. But you never asked who I really was. And now, she looked down at the ring she had taken off. I don't think I can marry someone who only loves me when I'm small. Before we begin, if you're still thinking about that moment when Emma took off her ring, wait till you find out what else she's been hiding. This chapter will break your heart and mend it in the same breath. So sit tight, and if you haven't already, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell. Because this story is just getting started. Jackson Wolf had faced competitors, crises, and takeovers. He'd seen billion-dollar contracts crumble in boardrooms with champagne still in the glasses. But none of it, prepared him for the woman standing in front of him right now. The woman he had just married. The woman who was not what she seemed. Emma, what are you saying? His voice was quiet, as though he were afraid the truth would break if spoken too loud. I'm saying, she said, her eyes meeting his without fear, that you never saw me. You saw what you needed me to be. I don't understand. Yes, you do, she whispered. And she was right. Somewhere deep down, he did. Because the truth wasn't that Emma had lied to him. The truth was that he had lied to himself. He wanted her to be untouched by wealth, untainted by ambition. He wanted purity, simplicity, something real. But he'd mistaken complexity for deception. Emma turned back toward the villa's stone balustrade. Below them, Lake Como shimmered in the dying light. She sighed, as if the weight of years pressed on her shoulders. I used to work in venture capital, she began. Private sector. Women-led innovations. I was good, too good. Made my first million at 27. By 30, I'd built a firm that rivaled mid-tier banks. But the men didn't like that. Jackson blinked. You. Yes. Her lips curled in a sad smile. I wore suits sharper than yours. Closed deals in Tokyo, Berlin, Cape Town. But every time I walked into a room, I had to prove I deserved to be there. Why didn't you tell me? Because you weren't ready to hear it. He stayed silent. I built that villa after selling my third startup. It was supposed to be a getaway. But then, my father died. Mama passed a year later. And suddenly, that villa felt too quiet. Too far from everything that mattered. She touched her ring again. So I gave it all up. Sold my assets. Donated half. Kept just enough to live quietly and went back to the only place that ever felt like home, Wyoming. Jackson's heart raced. The woman he thought he rescued had once owned more equity than he had. She wasn't just, not impressed, by his wealth, she had once wielded more. But, why hide it? He asked. I didn't hide it. I just didn't lead with it. Because I wanted someone who could love me, when I wasn't a headline. Someone who didn't fall for my net worth or power. Jackson stared, stunned. All those times he had assumed he was the powerful one. The generous one. The protector. In truth, she had been protecting him from the reality that he was falling in love with a woman far stronger than he could handle. He sat down slowly, rubbing his temple. So this was a test. Emma shook her head. No. It was a chance. I gave you the chance to know me, not the version of me the media writes about. And for a while, I thought maybe you did. But you kept calling me, simple. Pure. You thought I needed saving. Jackson faltered. I didn't mean it like that. Didn't you? He looked up. Her gaze was soft now, but it carried the ache of years. The silence between them thickened. Then she said something that broke him. I would have given you everything, Jackson. I still might. But not if you can only love me in pieces. He stood suddenly and walked to her. I love you, he said. Emma, I do. Maybe I got it wrong. Maybe I saw what I wanted to see. But that doesn't mean I can't change. Doesn't mean I won't fight for you. She looked up. For the first time since the wedding, tears shimmered in her eyes. "I don't want to be your fantasy," she whispered. "I want to be your equal." "Then let's start again," he said. "Tell me your story. All of it. No edits. No silence. I want to hear about the woman who built empires, and chose a dusty ranch over Wall Street." They stayed on the terrace that night long after the stars came out. She told him about her mentors, men who laughed at her ideas before offering her partnerships when she made their portfolios look weak. She told him about betrayal, about love lost in boardrooms, and nights she cried into spreadsheets. She told him about her sister, who died in a car crash at 25, and how Emma had raised her niece until she went to college. Jackson sat and listened. He didn't interrupt. He didn't defend himself. He just listened. For the first time in his life, he was in the presence of a woman who needed nothing from him, but gave him everything anyway. And he fell in love all over again. But this time, with the truth. The next morning, Jackson did something he'd never done. He woke up before Emma and made her coffee. Burned toast. Spilled jam. He was a mess, but a smiling one. When she entered the kitchen, she laughed. "What are you doing?" He handed her the cup. "Being the man you deserve." Her eyes softened. He got down on one knee. "I proposed once thinking I was giving you everything. But now I know, you are everything. Emma Grace Walker, will you marry me again? This time, no illusions. Just truth." She laughed through tears. "Yes, you fool." They renewed their vows under the same willow tree 3 months later. This time, there were more people. Her old colleagues. His mother. Her niece. A choir of ranch kids. Emma wore a power suit under her wedding veil. Jackson wore cowboy boots. It was beautiful. Unscripted. Real. They bought a small company together a year later and turned it into one of the fastest growing ethical tech platforms in the country. But they still kept the ranch. And every year, on the day she took off her ring, Jackson gave her a new one, not because he needed to, but because he wanted to remind her. He now saw all of her. Not just the girl under the willow tree, but the warrior, the architect, the storm, and the calm. You thought it was over, but what if Emma's past isn't done with her yet? What if someone powerful, was watching, waiting, and ready to destroy everything she rebuilt? Buckle in, because this chapter takes a shocking turn. And don't forget to like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the bell icon, because this emotional roller coaster is far from over. A year had passed since the second vows under the willow tree. Jackson and Emma had built a life grounded in love, truth, and a little bit of dirt under their nails. Their tech startup, Woven Ethic, was growing faster than projections. They hired students from underserved communities, developed green data centers, and were on the cover of Time's Most Conscious Capitalists issue. They were finally happy. Until a letter arrived. No return address. No postage. Just a black envelope slipped under their ranch's front door one rainy morning. Emma picked it up, frowning. The handwriting on the front was familiar. Her heart froze. She opened it slowly. Inside was a single line. Greater than, you may have buried the company, but you forgot to bury me. No name. No signature. But Emma knew exactly who it was from. A man named Dominic Crane. A name she had scrubbed from her memory. From her digital footprint. From every board meeting and every press release. Crane had once been her partner. Not romantically. Professionally. Brilliant. Ruthless. Dangerous. And obsessed with her. They'd launched a crypto-adjacent fintech platform together, VanePay. When the numbers started to grow, so did Dominic's ego. Then the threats began. The manipulation. The silent war for control. Emma left before he could implode the company, and secretly built a case against him for money laundering and digital asset fraud. The government used her evidence. Dominic went to prison for 5 years. But now he was out, and he had found her. Emma didn't tell Jackson immediately. She couldn't. Not yet. She needed to find out what Dominic knew. How close he was. What he wanted. But Jackson noticed. "You've been quiet," he said one evening, brushing her hair behind her ear. "I'm just tired," she lied. That night, she went online. Searched public court records. Searched his name. Nothing obvious. But then, she found it. A photo uploaded by a social media intern at a tech conference in Austin. And in the background, barely visible, Dominic Crane. Smiling. Watching. Behind Jackson. Her stomach flipped. She realized then, it wasn't just about her past. It was about their future. Dominic wasn't here for revenge. He was here for war. A week later, it began. Their platform, Woven Ethic, was hit by a massive security breach. Client trust indexes dropped. Journalists started sniffing around, whispering old accusations with new spin. Then the threats turned personal. Emma's private emails leaked. A manipulated photo of her and Dominic from years ago was sent to every investor. Jackson was furious, but not at her. He knew something was wrong. One night, after a boardroom explosion and another PR fire to put out, he turned to her and said quietly, "Emma, is this Crane?" She didn't deny it, and he didn't walk away. Instead, he took her hand and said, "Then we end this together." They hired a private intelligence firm. They uncovered offshore accounts. A shell company registered in Belize funding the attacks. They traced the shell to a crypto laundering platform, Vein Black. Dominic's signature move. But the evidence wasn't enough to prosecute, not yet. So Emma did something dangerous. She baited him. She sent a message through their old encrypted channel, the one they used to build empires together. "Greater than, I'm tired of hiding. Let's finish this. Just you and me." He responded in minutes. "Greater than, name the place." She chose the only place she knew she could control, her parents' old barn in Wyoming. Neutral ground. No tech. No cameras. Just truth. Jackson begged to come, but she said no. "This has to end the way it began," she told him. "He needs to see I'm not afraid anymore." So she went. The barn smelled of hay and ghosts. Emma waited in silence, heart pounding. When the door creaked open, she didn't flinch. Dominic Crane walked in with the same smug smirk, older now, but dangerous as ever. "Still playing farmer, Emma?" He sneered. She looked at him calmly. "Still playing criminal, Dominic?" They circled each other like old wolves. "You could have ruled with me," he said. "But you wanted to be the hero." "I was the hero," she replied. "You just didn't like that I was better at your game." He snapped. Rushed her. But what he didn't know, was that the barn wasn't without cameras. And Jackson was there. Hidden. Recording. 2 state agents stepped out from the shadows. Dominic's face went pale. "You recorded this?" Emma nodded. "Everything. Including your threats. Including your blackmail." He lunged toward her one last time. But this time, it was Jackson who stepped in front. "No one touches my wife," he growled. Dominic was arrested on the spot. And this time, he wouldn't be getting out. The news broke like wildfire. Billionaire power couple outsmarts crypto crime lord. Emma didn't hide anymore. She spoke at tech conferences, sharing her story. Telling women how to rise, protect, and rebuild. Jackson supported her every step of the way. And on the anniversary of their vow renewal, he surprised her with a plaque, hung under the willow tree. It read, "Greater than, for the girl who took off her ring, and gave me a reason to fight." She laughed, cried, kissed him under the sunset. Not because they were perfect, but because they were unbreakable. Together.